Hey folks, I'm back here with you again with a late show. I'm going to try to switch over to my new microphone here, and I'm gonna hope to God that the darn thing works. Okay, so bear with me here for just a moment. So what I want to talk with you about tonight are the varying definitions of the word narcissism. And here we go with the new microphone. Or not. Okay. Let's take a look and see if this is working. So, there are two definitions for the word narcissism. Two totally different terms and two totally different meanings. What does it mean, for instance, when somebody calls someone a narcissist colloquially? Let's say that someone is just talking in casual everyday conversation and they happen to call someone a narcissist. Well, what does that mean exactly? And what are the similarities and differences between that definition of a narcissist and the psychological definition laid out in the DSM-5? Please bear with me while I check that my microphone's connected. I don't want to be talking and have you not be able to hear me. One moment. Okay. So, essentially, when somebody colloquially uses this word, when somebody is talking maybe about a boss or somebody in their workplace and they call that person a narcissist, they say, "Oh, man, Bob is such a narcissist. You know, he just thinks he's the center of the world. He thinks he's God's gift, what have you." Does that mean that they're saying that Bob has been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder? Well, no, of course it doesn't. Of course it doesn't. There is a totally different colloquial meaning to that word that I think we should explore a little bit before we talk about what the DSM-5 defines as narcissism. Okay, because really there are some major differences here. And as many of you are aware, unless you've been living under a rock somewhere, you may know that we have a certain politician who has come to national prominence, shall we say, lately, who many folks would refer to as a classic narcissist. So I think that's where we need to start. Maybe that's a good place to start. Let's talk about that. So when somebody says that individual, who I'm going to do my best not to name right now because I don't want to be one of those small operations that gets torn to pieces because this individual was butthurt because somebody called him a name. So we're going to do our best to sort of avoid using that name. So this individual who is very prominent politically, hint hint, is somebody that folks colloquially sort of collectively refer to as a narcissist, right? Now, what does that mean, that colloquial definition? Well, I would say that it means, and I love your input in the comment section if you feel like talking about it a little bit. So I would say that probably means that this person is self-important, that people think that this individual is really in love with himself, that people might see this individual as somebody who thinks he's so great and who considers himself first before all others, sort of like the legend of Narcissus looking at his own reflection in the lake and falling in love with it and dying of starvation. And, that's that sort of classic colloquial definition of narcissism, isn't it? And that's what many folks are referring to this prominent politician as, right? It's what so many people are referring to this individual as. And while I agree that it's very likely this person is a narcissist, I don't think that they are a narcissist in the colloquial sense. So let's let that be our segue into the rest of the discussion. Let's talk about what being a narcissist means according to the DSM-5, which I am going to pull up right here. Okay, bear with me. We've just gotten our internet back, and it's just taking a moment to load. So let's talk about the diagnostic and statistical criteria of what a narcissist is. And again, like we talked about at the beginning of the show, this is something totally different than the colloquial definition of narcissism. This is an actual disorder. It's a personality disorder that falls under the aegis of cluster B, which means essentially a dangerous personality disorder, one that cannot be recovered from, one which afflicts somebody to their core, one which afflicts somebody on what I would term as a soul level. Now, I'm not getting into religion. I'm sort of using the colloquial definition of soul. I mean, who you are as a person. What makes you you? What makes you tick? So I really would say that narcissism is something that affects folks and afflicts folks on a soul level. It is at the core of who they are as a human. Now, what does it mean, Stella? You're probably going, great, awesome, Demony, great description, but what does it mean? So I'm going to read you what the DSM-4 and 5 criteria are for this particular personality disorder. And for those of you who are unaware, the DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual that psychologists and folks in the mental health professions use. And it's a very, very handy tool for diagnosing, but it's also a handy tool just for reference, because there are times when you're not going to be able to diagnose, and there are also going to be times where diagnosis is actually unhelpful. Even if you can diagnose, you shouldn't diagnose. It's unhelpful to the person. It's unhelpful because maybe there is no treatment. Maybe it's unhelpful just to have that diagnosis in that person's chart. I'm not going to get into this particular subject too deeply right now, but with the way that healthcare is in this country, it can be sort of an affliction to folks who would be trying to get jobs and who would be trying to go to other doctors and seek treatment for unrelated issues. If, for instance, their chart said that they were schizophrenic, well, maybe they have symptoms of a very severe illness. Now that the doctor sees that schizophrenia is in their chart, they may not take those symptoms so seriously. Maybe they'll apply for insurance later on. I think that's particularly poignant right now. And maybe they'll be denied because they've got this really serious pre-existing mental health condition, right? So there are reasons that it can sort of benefit people sometimes not to have these diagnoses in their chart. And there are reasons that it can benefit the mental health care provider to not diagnose. So, that being said, it's important to know the symptoms. At least, I think it's really important for even lay people to know the symptoms of cluster B personality disorders. It really is. So, I mentioned that narcissism is one of the cluster B personality disorders. The rest of the cluster B personality disorders include borderline personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder, and psychopathy, or as some people refer to it, sociopathy. So These are the major cluster B danger, Will Robinson. You have time to turn back now, sort of personality disorders that are untreatable, incurable. And I really think that it benefits everybody to know how to identify the symptoms and signs of these disorders. So, the criteria for a personality disorder in general, particularly a cluster B personality disorder, per the DSM-4, was an enduring pattern of inner experience and behavior that deviates markedly from the expectations of the individual's culture. That means cultural norms. It doesn't mean whether you are black or white, Indian or European, Asian, Pacific Islander, what have you. It means it deviates from the norms of the culture around you. This pattern is manifested in two or more of the following areas: cognition, which means the way that your perception, is, the way that you're perceiving reality, the way that you interpret yourself, the way that you interpret others, the way that you interpret things that are happening around you. I mean, there are certainly philosophers that make good cases for the subjective reality experience and the fact that perception is reality, but we all have to agree that there are facts out there that are unalterable, if that's a word, inalterable. I should know this, I'm a writer. But there are facts out there that can't be altered. There are facts out there and experiences out there that are shared throughout the human condition. And there are things out there that we can't say are subjective. For instance, is it raining outside? No, it is not raining outside right here in Chicago. It's not. You could say that it's raining. You could say that you feel rain on your skin. However, meteorology is going to disprove that and is going to, in fact, prove that it is not raining. So these are facts that we can all agree upon that are part of the human experience. And this is what I'm talking about when I talk about cultural norms and perceived experience versus sort of objective across-the-board experience. Okay. Number 2 is affectivity, i.e. affect, the range of emotion, the range of appropriate response or inappropriate response. Number 3 is interpersonal functioning. Number 4 is impulse control. Impulse control is obviously a big one for narcissists and sociopaths and all cluster Bs. So is cognition. Affectivity is as a byproduct of those things. And of course, so is interpersonal functioning. The enduring pattern is inflexible and pervasive across a broad range of personal and social situations. So it doesn't matter what's happening or who's involved, this person is going to act the same way. Remember how I've talked before about that hamster wheel that this person is constantly treading and retreading. If you've listened to Pink Floyd, Wish You Were Here, running over the same old ground, on how we found the same old fears, you know what I'm saying? You're retreading that ground. If you're a narcissist, you are retreading that same old ground in that hamster wheel in your head. You're not getting anywhere while everybody else is proceeding to move through life and to grow and change and develop and deepen and have their experience become richer in life and to sort of enrich themselves on a soul level. You're sitting there stuck as the narcissist. Your level of maturity is very, very behind everyone else's, and you have to work twice as hard to keep up. I oftentimes comment on how narcissists seem to lead the life of a Jersey Shore TV character, even if they keep that side of things hidden and they try to be a little bit more polished than that, they truly are living the life of somebody who is experiencing a severely protracted adolescence. They experience the world and react to things like a teenager whose brain is not fully developed would react. They are reactive and not proactive, no matter how much scheming and how much how do I want to put this? Opposition research they do with the people around them, they are always playing catch up because they aren't on your level. And I really want to hammer that point home in every single one of these episodes. Please, folks, there is such a detrimental sort of like ideation of what narcissists are, who they are, how they affect things. They're not folk heroes. They're not super villains. They're not Doctor Who. They're not even the Master or Missy. They're simply people who are highly disordered, who are, because of their antics, often more noticed in society. It doesn't mean that they have a bigger impact. It doesn't mean that they're super geniuses. It just means that the little things they do are noticed. And sometimes they're even noticed because they're so bizarre. They're so odd. They're so out there. Bring it back to that politician I just, we can use that term loosely, that political office holder, I guess we'll say, that I just brought up. Their antics are so ridiculous and childlike that is why they get attention. That's why they dominate every news cycle. So let me read you very quickly the revised definition in the DSM-5, or the fifth version of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual that those in the mental health profession use. So, the essential features of a personality disorder are impairments in personality, self and interpersonal, functioning, and the presence of pathological personality traits. To diagnose a personality disorder, the following criteria must be met. A significant impairment in self, identity, or self-direction in interpersonal, empathy, or intimacy, functioning, which is something we've touched on before. Identity, they have none. Essentially, they have no identity. They have no self-direction. They have no capacity for intimacy. They have no capacity for empathy. And while they play at being intimate, their house of cards very quickly folds and chaos ensues, particularly for those who are sort of trapped within that house, the victim, the person they're targeting. And they do have more than one target at a time. They have what many call a narcissistic harem. I don't particularly support that terminology, but I think it evokes a certain, mental picture of what's going on and what this person is trying to achieve. I wouldn't actually call it a harem. Certainly nobody's a willing participant in this harem. I would call it, for instance, if the narcissist is a band manager. Forgive me, I'm a musician, okay? I equate everything in life back to music. So let's say that the narcissist is the epic, awesome, wonderful band manager. They're somebody oh my goodness, I'm blanking on the name right now, but the gentleman who discovered Dr. Dre and NWA. He runs just a multi-million, if not billion-dollar business, total genius. He's not on the stage performing with you, but he's trying to pull the strings. He's actually successful, and I'm sure he's probably not a narcissist. And if he is, he's a darn successful one. But, it's somebody like that who's behind the scenes. They're managing things, and their quote-unquote harem, they've got like a group of backup singers. Now, they've got the lead singer, but let's say the lead singer doesn't want to perform anymore. They've gotten sick of the BS. They've gotten sick of the crazy. Okay, he can just pull from that, group of backup singers and pull the next one up. So I wouldn't really call it a harem as much as I would call it almost, like I said, like a group of backup singers, the B team, if you will. He's got his A team, and then he's got his B team over here. So it's important to look at it that way. It's not really a harem. I like the imagery that comes up with that terminology, but I don't think that it's totally appropriate. So one or more pathological personality traits that have bizarre facets, bizarre sides to them. Impairments in personality functioning and the individual's personality trait expression. They're relatively stable across time and consistent across situations. Now, I don't mean the person is stable. I mean their bizarre interpretation of facts, their bizarre actions, their bizarre take on life is stable. It's unshakable. It's unchangeable. Remember, we talked about them not being able to change and move forward like the rest of us. Well, that's what I'm referring to. They are unable to change. They don't deviate from their pattern. Again, we're going back to that hamster wheel, right? We're going back to that immovable, running but not getting anywhere situation, retreading the same old ground. So they don't deviate. Their behavioral patterns remain the same. And it's interesting because as a witness to their behavioral patterns, you'll notice that across the board, whether they're dealing with a perceived small, tiny little slight or some major attack, they will react the same. Let's bring it back to that political office holder that we discussed. This individual reacts with the same amount of venom and tries to basically fire anybody from the person that he thinks looks at him wrong in the hallway to the person who does something he doesn't like, who's running an intelligence division. Need I say more? So this is what we're talking about when we're talking about consistency. The impairments in personality functioning and their personality trait expression are not better understood as normative for the individual's developmental stage or sociocultural environment. Well, that sounds like a lot of gobbledygook to many of you, I'm sure, but what is being said is that this person they're functionally impaired. They're not able to function on our level. They express this trait. They retread the same old ground. It doesn't matter what kind of an effect someone's behavior, for instance, has on them. They're going to react the same. It doesn't matter what they're experiencing in life. They're going to react the same. Big or small, major danger or tiny little obstacle, they're going to react the same. They don't deviate. That's what they're saying. And finally, the impairments in personality functioning and the individual's personality trait expression are not solely due to the direct physiological effects of a substance, i.e., this isn't caused from drug abuse or alcohol abuse, and it's not caused by a medical condition, right? Like TBI, like head trauma, like being on the autism spectrum, something like that, right? So they're saying there is no physical medical reason that they behave this way, and it's not caused due to substance abuse. Now, I do want to walk into that little quagmire for a minute and just try to sort things out a little bit for you in your minds. There are many addicts who are also narcissists. Narcissism and addiction, narcissism and drug use go hand in hand. I'm not suggesting that everyone who is an addict or a drug user is also a narcissist. And I'm not suggesting that everyone who's a narcissist is an addict or a drug user. So let's be clear about that. What I'm saying is that there is correlation. Maybe there's some causation too, in that being a narcissist makes them more likely to abuse substances. They don't have the same inhibitions as everybody else either. They don't have that moral compass that says, hey, maybe doing a speedball right now before I walk into a meeting is not the best idea, right? They don't have that. They don't have that thing in their brain that tells them, maybe having sex in the coffee room with my assistant isn't the very best idea. And they don't have the morality to think of that either. So they're very impaired. While they feel that they're far above and beyond everybody else, they truly are impaired. So I wanted to just discuss a little bit with you about the differences between that colloquial definition and the actual definition of somebody who genuinely has narcissism, who has that personality disorder. Okay. For those of you who are looking for a little bit more information on NPD or narcissistic personality disorder, I'm going to read you the revised DSM-5 criteria, and again, I'll go through it and explain it point by point so that it doesn't sound like a bunch of gobbledygook. But first, I'm going to take a well-deserved drink of my water. Okay, so the DSM-5 has this to say about narcissism. The essential features of a personality disorder are impairments in personality, i.e. self and interpersonal functioning, and the presence of pathological personality traits. To diagnose NPD, the following criteria must be met. And I just shortened narcissistic personality disorder there to NPD. So that is what I'm talking about when you hear me say NPD. It's narcissistic personality disorder. So it's important to distinguish between that colloquial, he's a narcissist or she's a narcissist, and the actual disorder of narcissism, that personality soul level disorder. So let's get down to brass tacks here. The essential features are as follows. A, significant impairments in personality functioning manifest by 1, impairments in self-functioning, A or B, A, identity, and B, self-direction. So what is identity? Identity, as described by the DSM-5, is excessive reference to others for self-definition and self-esteem regulation. Exaggerated self-appraisal may be inflated or deflated. Now, I agree with this. I think that many folks get really hung up on how overinflated their sense of self is. I genuinely feel that at their core, most of these folks suffer from deflated self-esteem. They don't have a genuine face, a genuine identity. They don't have genuine self-esteem, nor are they capable of having such. Or vacillate between extremes. Okay, that's true. But I don't think that the extremes sort of exist within them. I think that it's more, if everybody's praising me and I'm a narcissist, I'll be riding high, sitting pretty, big boss hog over here, ruling from my tiny throne, tiny king on a tiny throne, But then when people don't like me, when my subjects dare to question me, then I kind of go retreat into my little hole and lick my wounds because, darn it, I've just gotten narcissistic injury because people don't like the awful things I'm doing. Poor me. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a definition of how fragile these people's egos are and their self-esteem is. So they do vacillate between extremes, but I would say more outwardly so. Inside, there's nothing there. Emotional regulation mirrors fluctuations in self-esteem. Well, yeah, but again, not to nitpick the DSM-5, because really, who am I to do that? I'm just somebody with my own opinions, and opinions are like assholes. Everybody has one. Still, since this is my show, I'm going to share with you my opinion on that matter. I think that there is no genuine emotional regulation for a narcissist. I think that emotional regulation is something that they are incapable of possessing. I think that the only thing that fluctuates is the appearance of emotional regulation. The only thing that ever fluctuates is how well they appear at any given time to control and regulate their emotions. They actually don't have any sense of that, and they don't have any way to actually regulate their emotions internally. It's all about the appearance, really. So I say let's be clear about that, and let's make sure that we're not awarding these folks more credit than they're due. Okay, so we talked about emotional regulation. We talked about how their inner turmoil reflects to the outside world. So let's move on to number 2. Impairments in interpersonal functioning, A or B. A, empathy, B, intimacy, right? So self-direction is like goal setting, what are their standards, and as we talked about, empathy is reference to others for their definition. They have basically a totally external locus of control. Locus of control is where you think the control for how your life is going lies. And of course, a narcissist is not going to look inward for that, like many of us would. Most of us have a rather balanced sense of locus of control. Whereas, for instance, right now I'm standing on my balcony looking out at the flooded river. And of course, I realize that the river is something that's out of my control and it's affected my life. But I also realize that I have the capability to make choices that are good for me and that I can protect myself as much as possible from the flooding, right? So that's a balanced viewpoint. An internal locus of control would be, I control the river. I can actually control the river with my thoughts right now, which could be reflective of a mental illness or personality disorder. External locus of control would be, that goddamn river is ruining my whole life, and, if it weren't for that river, my husband wouldn't have left me or something. So, narcissists are, of course, an odd mixture of both. For the most part, their locus of control is very external. He did this to me, she did this to me, everybody victimizes me, poor me, I'm so victimized, everybody takes advantage, I'm such a good person. Why doesn't anybody recognize how goddamn cool and great and wonderful and awesome I am, right? But on the other hand, there's this sense of, I control everything, I'm in control of everything, I influence everything, I'm the influencer, I'm the person who makes everything happen and makes the wheels spin, and I'm at the center of the universe, and all planets just spin around me accordingly, right? So there's no balance. It's one of two extremes, and that's what they're saying here. So as far as empathy and intimacy, relationships are largely superficial. They exist to serve the self-esteem regulation, or the narcissistic supply, as we call it, of the narcissist. They're, as the DSM says, mutually constrained by little genuine interest in other people's experiences, and they're predominant in their need for personal gain. Well, I think that's pretty self-evident and self-explanatory, and I don't think I really need to explain that to you guys. You're smart people. You get the drift. As far as empathy is concerned, their empathy is impaired. They don't have an ability to recognize or identify with the feelings or needs of others. They're excessively attuned to reactions of others, but only if perceived as relevant to themselves. Over or underestimate of their own effect on others. Interesting, just like what I talked about. There's no balance. It's only one of two polarities with that locus of control. Total internal locus of control. I control the world. Everything revolves around me. Or total external locus of control. If it weren't for that river, my husband wouldn't have left me, right? So, this is a narcissist. No balance. No real control over anything. Any minor thing can set them off. Now, there are two types of narcissists. There are several subtypes, but there are two main types of narcissists. Okay? The overt, malignant narcissist, like that political office holder we talked about, and those sort of covert, introverted narcissists who may come in the form of a mom who guilt trips you all the time, and yet somehow you're left feeling guilty for things you didn't do. You're left feeling guilty for things that she did, and you're wondering, how did she make me feel so guilty about that? So there's a lot of passive aggression. There's a lot of underhandedness. There's a lot of sort of manipulative behavior. So those are the two main major types of narcissism. Now, they're not recognized by the DSM-5. This is a consensus that several mental health practitioners and caregivers have come to regarding narcissism. And I do subscribe to this philosophy. I think that it's fairly self-evident and that it is very easily proven. Okay. So the final descriptor in the DSM-5 of narcissism, or rather narcissistic personality disorder, NPD, is B, the pathological personality traits in the following domains. Antagonism. Well, what is antagonism? When somebody is antagonistic, what does that mean? That means that they are harassing. They're molesting, not physically molesting, by the way. They're molesting, they're harassing, they're bothersome, they're uppity, if you will. They're snooty, they're in your business, they're in your face, and usually they're wrong. Usually they're pushing some kind of a crazy BS agenda that only they subscribe to. Apologies, apparently somebody's having some muffler trouble out there as they drive by at midnight. And grandiosity, which is one of the subtypes of antagonism. So how do they antagonize? Oftentimes by being grandiose. And now I do agree that grandiosity is the main issue here. Stay with me, because you know that I just told you there are two types of narcissism, or two main types. The malignant overt narcissist and the covert narcissist, who can actually be malignant or not malignant. They can be, I don't want to say benign, really, but they can be like malignant, where they're causing everybody just awful pain and suffering, or they can be a little less malignant, where they're just kind of funny or entertaining, or, that guy that's the life of the party, but, you don't really get any closer than that. You just kind of laugh at his jokes and go on about your way, right? So there is that sort of rare type of narcissist. Now, that person is no more likely to be able to empathize or sympathize with somebody in a tough situation than the grandiose malignant narcissist. But still, there are degrees of malignance. Okay, so I feel that grandiosity can be expressed by both a sort of less malignant narcissist who is a little bit more covert and less overt, because they can be grandiose in their covertness. They can be grandiose in their passive aggression, right? So let's not overlook that. I think that this is a really good descriptor, obviously, or it wouldn't be in the DSM-5. As far as a malignant narcissist, I think it's pretty self-evident how, in what way they can be grandiose. Again, thinking of that political office holder who is over the top. Every statement that they make is, a little suspect. Let's say that they are less truthful than most folks. They like to make big, grandiose, over-the-top statements about everything. They like to be the center of attention at all times. So I do genuinely feel that both kinds of narcissists are grandiose. So those are the major differences between the sort of colloquial use of the term narcissist and the actual diagnostical criteria that encapsulates the diagnosis of narcissist, of actual NPD, of actual narcissistic personality disorder. And I do hope that this show, however rushed it was, I hope that it has helped you a little bit. I hope that it's helped you to have a little bit of a better understanding of those definitions. I hope that it has given you a little bit of a better understanding of the sort of subtypes of narcissism. And I really hope that it has given you some insight into the potential narcissists that you might be dealing with in your life. I really want to sort of drive that point home, that, you know, that you can use narcissist as a colloquialism. Absolutely, you can. And, you know, I understand that. I use the word literally as a colloquialism, even though I'm a writer. And I clearly understand the differences between literal and actual. You know, I think the English language, when I can use it properly, evolves. I think that language is sort of a living thing. So I understand that it can be used both ways, but I don't want any of you to feel confused when you come up against terminology that's used differently colloquially than it might be medically. And I want you to be able to really discern the difference and be very confident and secure in the fact that you have the correct definition of what narcissism is at your fingertips. I want you to know exactly what it means, and darn it, I want you to know how to identify a narcissist so that you are confident that you won't be taken advantage of. All right, so that's really what I want to do for all of you. Thank you so much for listening in. I've got some hungry kitties to feed, as you have heard throughout the show, because darn it, they want some input here. And this is their show too, just like it's their house, not mine, and their life, not mine, right? Anybody who has kids or pets knows this. So thank you for tuning in to our show tonight, and I hope that this has helped you in some way. Please let me know if you have any questions, if you have any comments that are respectful and topically relevant and appropriate. Please feel free to leave them here. I want to very quickly plug my book before we have to wrap it up here. We've got just a couple minutes left, and I'm going to be opening cat food cans, full discretion, and just letting you know. So I want to kind of let you know here, as I'm feeding my animals, that I do have a book that was just published by Amazon Kindle. It comes in both ebook and actual print form, so you can get it as a paperback or as an ebook. It's very short. It's really an instructional manual, and it's for those of us who have been, and I think we all do really, but it's for those of us who have folks in our lives who we love and care about, who, for whatever reason, it could have been because we messed up horribly, and yes, Annie, you're right, and it could be through no fault of our own, who simply won't talk to us. They won't return our calls, they won't return our texts, we're at a loss, we're feeling awful, we want this person to come back into our lives, but we just cannot seem to get them to connect with us, and we can't seem to connect with them either. This book is for you if you fit that description. And so I want to offer it to you for free for a limited time. You can get it on your Kindle. You can borrow it for free. And you can order it as an ebook for $3.99. Not a bad price to get the person that you love back in your life for good, right? Now I just want to give you full honesty here and transparency. I used this program on myself. And it worked for me. I got somebody back into my life who I genuinely thought would never talk to me again. This person has been a part of my life for close to a year now, actually. And it's been a real long, strange trip, and I am so thankful that I tried this program. I'll tell you, I felt so silly at the beginning of it, but I was at that point where I felt like, how much more harm can be done here? This person won't talk to me. I haven't done anything wrong. Actually, this individual was, and still is, in a relationship, I'm not going to say what kind, with a narcissist. And of course, this person's life was being very controlled. Their communications and relationships were being very controlled. I managed with the use of only this program to get back into this person's life, which is a huge feat, and I want that for all of you. And of course, I want to tell you, if you're dealing with a narcissist, or rather somebody who is in a narcissist life, be careful. All right, folks, check it out, look it up on Amazon Kindle. The cover is actually used in this photo for this episode. Have a wonderful night and be well.